Welcome to the deep dive. We take the dense policy papers and research you send our way, and we cut right to the core. Today, we're looking at a really ambitious proposal called the Solar Shield for the Aravallis. Our mission is to figure out how this radical new idea plans to stop the illegal mining that's just relentlessly tearing apart one of Northwest India's most important natural assets.
It's a huge topic, and to really get the solution, you first have to understand the scale of the problem. The Aravalli Range, it's not just some scenic backdrop, it stretches across Gujarat, Rajasthan, Haryana, right up to Delhi. It is, and I don't think this is an exaggeration, the ecological backbone of the entire region.
Right, it's a whole system.
A vital ancient system. It acts as a critical watershed, it recharges groundwater for millions of people, and maybe the most important job it has. It's a massive 700-kilometer-long natural barrier.
A barrier against what, exactly?
Against the desert. The Aravallis are literally what's blocking the Thar Desert from just marching east. They stop the dust from burying fertile plains and huge urban centers, especially Delhi.
So when you damage the Aravallis, you're not just losing a hill.
You're weakening a defensive line. And the fallout is immediate. More dust storms, terrible water stress, amplified heat. It's a systemic failure, and it's happening in one of the most densely populated places on Earth.
And the sources we've looked at, they paint a really grim picture. They call it a repeating tragedy. You see these crackdowns, police raids, fines, but the illegal mining just pops right back up again. It's like a game of whack-a-mole.
That's the perfect analogy, because it shows the problem isn't a lack of laws on the books. It's a failure of the whole governance structure and of the economic incentives.
What do you mean by that?
Well, enforcement is just structurally weak. It's totally fragmented. You've got multiple state governments, different forestry departments, mining departments, police.
All working in silos, I assume?
Or even across purposes. They're all stopped by state boundaries. So, inconsistency becomes the biggest enemy of protection.
And I imagine the monitoring isn't great either.
It's erratic, often reactive. But the real poison in the system, the structural issue, is that it all relies on personal discretion. When the decision to issue a fine or seize a truck depends on the judgment of one official, that just creates the perfect environment for corruption. It's classic rent-seeking.
Let's pause on that term, rent-seeking. It can sound a bit academic. What does that look like on the ground here?
Think of it this way. Instead of making money by creating actual value like legally mining stone and paying your taxes, the illegal operators use their profits to bribe officials. They pay them to look the other way or to delay a raid or to get heads up. They're extracting unearned cash through bribery, not by participating in the legitimate economy.
And as long as that's the most profitable option?
The illegal mining will always win. Enforcement becomes this endless, expensive, and frankly, losing battle.
Okay, so let's unpack the alternative. The sources are very clear on this. Policing is necessary, but it's not enough. You need to create a stronger, competing reality on the ground. And that's where this proposal comes in, the Aravalli Solar Conservation and Livelihood Zone, or ASCLZ.
Yes, and what's so fascinating here is the philosophical shift. It's a total redesign. It takes that messy, fragmented, corruption-prone policing problem, and it converts it into a verifiable, enforceable performance contract.
So you stop chasing the bad guys.
You stop trying to. Instead, you introduce a massive legitimate economic force solar power, but you make its very success conditional on protecting the land.
And the engine driving that whole shift is something called the Conservation Performance License, the CPL. How exactly does that work?
The CPL is the absolute core of this. A company gets the right to build a big solar project. But, and this is the key, that right is explicitly conditional. It's conditional on them delivering two things, clean energy and verified ecological and community outcomes. And the number one outcome is stopping illegal mining in their zone, 2147.
But wait, if you're putting a huge solar farm on degraded land, aren't you just swapping one problem mining for another, like industrial sprawl? How do you avoid that trade-off?
Oh, that is the crucial question. And the answer is financial teeth. Real teeth. The CPL forces the operator to put a huge performance bond, a massive amount of their own capital, into an escrow account.
Real money they can't touch.
Millions. And it will be forfeited or drawn down from immediately if specific evidence-backed illegal activities are detected in their licensed area.
So you're basically weaponizing the private operator's own balance sheet against the illegal miners.
Precisely. If our monitoring system detects new excavation or an unauthorized road being cut or someone tampering with the equipment, the financial penalty is swift, it's automatic, and it's non-negotiable. The message is crystal clear. protects this land, or you will lose your bond, your investment, and maybe your entire license. It turns private capital into a guardian with serious skin in the game.
That completely flips the cost-benefit analysis for the operator, doesn't it? The cost of failing is immediate, and it scales up from fines to termination, even blacklisting.
And to manage this whole system, which crosses state lines, the policy recommends creating a single-purpose authority, the Aravalli Protection and Solar Authority, or APSA.
That sounds like the hardest part politically. Getting all these states and departments to cede power to one new body.
It's definitely challenging, but it's necessary. APSA would be the thing that solves the fragmentation problem. It would run the tenders for the CPLs, manage those escrow bonds, and this is critical, it would ring-fence all the revenue specifically for restoration and protection. Without that central body, it just falls apart.
Okay, let's dig into the guardrails. Because this solar shield could easily become an ecological mistake in its own right. You have to stress this is not a license for solar everywhere.
Absolutely not. The whole thing is built on a very strict three-layer zoning framework. It's the most important guardrail. Layer 1 is the core or inviolate zone. This is your protected forests, your critical wildlife corridors, your most sensitive groundwater recharge areas.
And the rule there is?
Absolute. No solar, no mining, ever. This zone is for pure defense and preservation.
Okay. Then layer 2 is the buffer or defensive ring. That's the target for the CPLs.
Correct. This layer specifically targets land that's already damaged. We're talking abandoned mines, old quarries, degraded foothills, the transport routes the illegal miners are already using.
So you're putting the barrier on land that's already scarred.
Exactly. You create a legitimate economic presence on the front lines.
And finally, layer 3, the community livelihood belt. This sounds like where the social side of things really comes into play. You mentioned something called agrivoltaics.
This is vital. The biggest fear from local communities is always displacement, that they'll lose access to their grazing lands because of some giant fenced-off industrial park. Agrivoltaics is designed to prevent that. It ensures that generating solar power and continuing land-based livelihoods can happen in the same place.
How do you actually do that? It's more than just putting panels on a farm, right?
Oh, much more. It requires strict design standards. The panels have to be mounted high off the ground with wide spacing between them.
So livestock can still move around underneath.
And people can continue grazing or other activities. On top of that, the operators are required to do native planting under the panels to stabilize the soil.
And what about water? Cleaning solar panels can use a ton of water, which is a huge issue in a dry region like the Aravallis.
The CPL mandates low water cleaning protocols. The whole design, the raised panels, the native plants, the water rules, is about making sure solar solves one problem without creating a new one for the local communities.
And they can't build new roads that could be used by miners.
Right. They have to actively avoid creating new logistics routes for the very people they're supposed to be stopping.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me. The whole model hinges on detection. You're replacing that slow, discretionary enforcement with continuous data-driven monitoring, MRV.
The MRV stack is the enforcement engine, and it's designed for certainty and speed, operating completely independently. The first layer is satellite-based change detection. High-res imagery is constantly scanning the entire zone. It's looking for new excavation scars, vegetation being stripped, even the dust plumes from a rock crusher.
So the satellites flag an anomaly, and then you send in the drones.
Exactly. Drones are for rapid verification of the satellite alerts and for regular audits. But the crucial output is what's called an evidence packet. It's a time-stamped, geotagged file with imagery, telemetry, a full chain of custody. It's not a subjective report from an inspector. It's verifiable data that immediately triggers the financial penalty.
And that evidence-based certainty is what breaks the illegal miners' business model. Right now, they can just flee before a slow enforcement team shows up.
That's the key deterrent shift. The proposal calls for a modern doctrine based on unpredictability. The threat isn't just getting caught anymore. It's the absolute certainty of an immediate financial consequence, that bond being drawn down, the moment hard evidence is generated. It makes illegal mining a losing bet.
But what stops APSA, the authority itself, from being compromised?
Transparency. That's the final guardrail. The whole thing hinges on public accountability. APSA would have to run a public-facing dashboard in near real time. It would show the maps, the satellite alerts, the inspection results, and most importantly, any penalties issued. It just makes the system much harder to corrupt quietly.
Let's talk about the money. One of the best parts of this seems to be that it's designed to be self-financing. It avoids the budget chaos that kills most government environmental programs.
It does. It monetizes the economic activity that it's enabling. APSA gets revenue from the annual CPL license fees from the solar companies, from a small conservation cess, like a tax on the power they generate, and from the interest earned on all those huge escrowed bonds.
And those funds are ring-fenced, right? They can't be rated for other government projects.
That ring fencing is non-negotiable. All the penalties and fees go right back into restoration work and keeping the MRV system running. So you get clean energy and a protection system that doesn't just collapse when government budgets get tight.
But protection won't last if the local communities feel locked out. How does a proposal actually align their livelihoods with conservation? I see a mention of a community benefit fund.
The CBF is a legal requirement of the CPL. Operators have to contribute a fixed amount. The sources suggest 1 to 2% of their gross revenue into a local fund. That creates a real economic incentive for locals to become stewards of the project, not to collude with illegal miners for a small side payment.
So what does that 1 or 2% actually buy on the ground?
Tangible, verifiable things. Skill training for local kids to become the O&M techs for the solar farm. Building water harvesting structures for the village. Fodder banks for livestock. Supporting women-led microenterprises.
So it shifts the whole perception. Solar isn't an intrusion, it's a shared opportunity.
Exactly. And when the community is on board, they become your best human intelligence network. They add more eyes on the ground. You turn a vulnerability into a core strength.
Okay, last piece of the puzzle, the procurement. You have to make sure you get good operators who actually care about conservation, not just the company with the lowest price.
Right, and that's where that quality and cost-based selection model, or QCBS, comes in. You can't just award the contract to the lowest bidder. Instead, the scoring rubric has to be heavily weighted towards the non-financial parts of the bid.
How does that weighting work in practice?
Well, a typical contract might be 60% technical, 40% financial. Here, that technical score would be dominated by measurable commitments. How good is their monitoring proposal? How much are they willing to put in the escrow bond above the minimum? How detailed and credible is their restoration plan? A company that proposes a better drone fleet and a bigger bond gets a real advantage, even if their price is a little bit higher.
So if we tie this all together, what you're really describing is a shift away from treating protection as some kind of heroic one-off event, like a single police raid. Instead, you're designing it as a permanent governance mechanism that's embedded in the daily business of a multi-million-dollar company.
That's the perfect synthesis. The CPL just flips the whole logic. Private capital gets paid to make money, but it gets punished financially, immediately, and automatically for any ecological harm that's detected by a transparent system. It's an incredibly smart way to solve a complex regulatory failure, the fragmentation, the corruption, with a tough, enforceable contract.
And the sources lay out a practical path forward, right? They don't suggest doing this everywhere at once.
No, they recommend a credible Phase 1 pilot. Start with 3 to 5 sites in different contexts, an old quarry in Rajasthan, a livelihood belt in Haryana, and just prove the model. Measure the reduction in lining incidents, track the vegetation recovery, see the local income rise. You have to build that political and public trust before you can scale it up.
So what does this all mean for you listening? If you care about protecting vital resources like the Aravallis, you should demand that every single one of these projects has an escrowed bond big enough to really hurt if it's forfeited. You should demand independent audits and that public dashboard that tracks everything in near real time. If it's done right, the solar shield creates a reality where illegal mining is finally a losing bet.
The whole model converts this tangled governance failure into a measurable contract. And it all rests on the certainty and speed of consequences, delivered by evidence satellites, drones, public data. And that raises a much bigger question to think about. If you can base deterrence on verifiable evidence and guaranteed penalties, what other intractable governance failures way beyond illegal mining could be solved by converting a policing problem into a measurable performance contract?